So today we're looking at a stack of sources that presents this massive collision of contradictions. It's really something.
It is.
On one hand, you've got a king, arguably the most famous monarch in the Bible, and he's sitting in his luxury palace just desperate to build a giant monument to God.
Right. All about architecture, legacy, permanence.
Exactly. And on the other hand, we have a farmer who seems to be, I don't know, just throwing seeds into places where they have absolutely no business growing.
Yeah, it's a real study in contrast, isn't it?
Mm.
We're basically looking at architecture versus agriculture today.
That's the perfect framework. We're doing a deep dive into the readings for Tuesday, January 27, 2026. Now, the calendar marks this as the Memorial of St. Thomas Aquinas, heavyweight champion of theology.
Right.
But what's so interesting is that the readings themselves, they don't really focus on high-minded philosophy.
Yeah.
They're about dirt, tents, cedar wood, and building projects.
Which is actually perfect for Aquinas, if you really think about it.
How so?
Well, he's the one who famously said, grace builds on nature. You can't have the supernatural without dealing with a natural reality first. And today's sources, especially this narrative from 2 Samuel and the Gospel of Mark, they're forcing us to ask a pretty fundamental question.
Which is?
Are we trying to build a structure for God, or are we, letting God grow something in us?
That's the mission for this deep dive. We've got the story of a king who gets told no, a psalm about loyalty, a parable about a sower who seems just terrible at efficiency, and a devotional on cultivating the heart.
A lot to unpack.
So let's get into our first builder. This is from the Old Testament reading, 2 Samuel chapter 7. Can you set the scene for us here?
Okay, so context is everything. King David is finally secure. This is after years of running for his life, hiding caves from Saul, fighting wars.
Right.
But now he's the king. He's secured his borders. And the text makes a very specific point to tell us he is dwelling in his house and the Lord has given him rest.
And it's not just any house. The source specifies it's a house of cedar. Is that just a throwaway architectural detail, or does it matter?
Oh, it matters a lot. In the ancient Near East, cedar wasn't local to Judea.
Okay.
It had to be imported, usually from Lebanon. It was rot-resistant, bug-resistant, and it smelled like wealth. Think of it as the ancient equivalent of Italian marble or gold leaf.
So it's a status symbol.
A huge status symbol. So David is sitting in this luxury, smelling the cedar, and then he looks out the window and sees the ark of God, the literal presence of God on earth, just sitting in a tent.
And he feels guilty.
Massive guilt. He says to Nathan the prophet, "Here I am living in a house of cedar while the ark of God dwells in a tent." It just feels wrong to him.
He wants to upgrade God's accommodation.
Exactly. He wants to build the temple.
And Nathan's initial reaction is basically, go for it. The Lord is with you.
Sure, which makes sense. It's a pious idea.
But then that night, the script flips completely. God speaks to Nathan, and the message is not a thank you.
No, it's a total reversal. God comes back with a question that is, well, it's almost sarcastic. He asks, should you build me a house to dwell in?
The emphasis on the you and the me there feels heavy.
It completely reverses the power dynamic. God is reminding David, you're the creature, I am the creator, you don't build a box for me.
Right.
And then God drops this fascinating history lesson. He says, I have not dwelt in a house from the day on which I led the children of Israel out of Egypt. I have been going about in a tent under cloth.
Going about in a tent. That phrase really jumped out at me. It implies movement.
That's the key theological insight. God is defining himself as a pilgrim God, a mobile God. He wasn't fixed to a GPS coordinate. He moved with the people through the wilderness.
So by trying to build a temple, David is kind of trying to domesticate God.
That's a great way to put it, to put him in a place where he can be visited and, maybe controlled.
And God just shuts it down. He explicitly says, did I ever utter a word to any one of the judges asking, why have you not built me a house of cedar?
Never asked for it. And then God flips the word house on its head. David wanted to build God a house, a temple, a building. God turns around and says, the Lord reveals to you that he will establish a house for you.
But he doesn't mean a building?
No. He means a dynasty, a lineage. God reminds David, I took you from the pasture, from the care of the flock. Essentially, I made you who you are. You don't build for me, I build for you.
There is a specific promise in there about the future, though. God says he will raise up an heir who will build the house for his name.
Right. And historically, that points to Solomon, who does eventually build the temple. Theologically, of course, it points to Christ. But look at the terms of the relationship God outlines. He says, I will be a father to him, and he shall be a son to me.
That sounds incredibly warm, but then there's this clause right after that feels a little gritty. It says, if he does wrong, I will correct him with the rod of men and with human chastisement.
And this is a crucial nuance that often gets skipped. This isn't a blank check for David's descendants to do whatever they want. God is promising parental discipline. The rod of men means political consequences, wars, strife. But, and this is the huge distinction from the previous king, Saul, God says, I will not withdraw my favor from him as I withdrew it from your predecessor Saul.
That's the key difference. Saul messed up, and the spirit left him. The kingdom was torn away.
Right.
God is saying to David, your line can mess up, and I will discipline them, but I'm not leaving.
Exactly. And it connects perfectly to Psalm 89, which is in our stack today. The refrain is, forever I will maintain my love for my servant. It's a covenant of loyalty that supersedes human failure.
Your house and your kingdom shall endure forever. That is a massive promise of stability. It feels so solid. It feels like, well, like architecture, stone and cedar.
It does. It feels permanent, structural.
But then we pivot to the gospel reading from Mark chapter 4, and suddenly we are not talking about firm foundations and cedar palaces anymore.
No.
We are talking about scattering seeds in the dirt.
And the scene itself is chaotic. The text says a very large crowd gathered around Jesus, so large that he had to get into a boat on the sea and sit down just to teach them, while the crowd stayed on the land.
I love that visual. You have the solid land, and then you have Jesus on the water, which is always moving. And he launches into the parable of the sower. Now, most people listening have probably heard this 1,000 times, but when you look at the agricultural technique here, the sower seems incompetent.
Highly inefficient. In modern farming or even careful ancient farming, you prepare the soil first, then you plant.
Right.
You don't just waste precious seed on a sidewalk. But this sower is just broadcasting seed everywhere, on the path, on rocks, in the weeds, and on good soil.
Let's get into what went wrong then, because Jesus explains it all later in the text. He gives the disciples and us the decoder ring. Scenario 1, the path.
The seed hits the hard ground, the birds eat it immediately. Jesus says this represents when Satan comes at once and takes away the word sown in them.
At once. That's frighteningly efficient. There's no time to even think about it. It's just gone.
It suggests a heart that is so hardened, maybe trampled by the traffic of life, that the message just bounces right off. There's no penetration.
And you have scenario 2, rocky ground. This one's deceptive because it actually looks like success at first.
Right. Jesus explains this as the emotional high. They hear the word and receive it at once with joy.
Oh, I think we've all been there. You go to a conference or hear a great speech and you're like, yes, this changes everything.
Exactly. The enthusiasm is real, but Jesus says they have no roots. They last only for a time. And notice what kills it: tribulation or persecution. When things get hard, or when the sun rises and scorches because the connection was only surface level emotion, they fall away.
Then comes the third soil, the thorns. This one feels the most dangerous to me because the plant actually survives for a while.
It does. It's not eaten by birds. It's not scorched by the sun. It grows.
But it gets choked. And the definition of thorns here is possibly the most important insight in this entire deep dive. The source text lists 3 specific things.
Yes, it does.
Worldly anxiety, the lure of riches, and the craving for other things.
The craving for other things. That phrase just haunts me. In the Greek, it implies this general lust for the rest. It's not necessarily evil things. It's just other things. Distractions. That feels so incredibly modern. We aren't usually choosing between God and devil worship. We're choosing between God and endless scrolling.
We're optimizing our portfolio or planning the next vacation.
Precisely. And notice the mechanism of death here. The birds devour. The sun scorches. The thorns choke. It's suffocation. A slow death by overcrowding.
And finally, the rich soil. These are the ones who hear, accept, and bear fruit.
And the yield is massive. 30, 60, 100-fold. I mean, in ancient agriculture, a 10-fold return was good. 100-fold is jackpot territory. It's miraculous.
Okay, now here is where it gets really interesting for me. In the source text, after Jesus tells this story, the disciples, the insiders, the guys who are supposed to get it, they ask him, what does this mean?
Which is pretty comforting for the rest of us. But Jesus gives them a bit of a hard time. He says, do you not understand this parable? Then how will you understand any of the parables? He's implying this is the cipher key for everything else.
He also says something kind of mysterious about the insiders versus the outsiders. He says to the 12, the mystery of the kingdom of God has been granted to you, but to those outside, everything is in parables, so they may look and see but not perceive.
That is a notoriously difficult passage. It sounds exclusionary, doesn't it? Like he's hiding the truth.
Yeah, a little bit.
But if you connect it back to the soil, it makes perfect sense. The parable itself acts like the seed. If you are hardened path people, the story is just a boring farming anecdote. You look, but you don't perceive.
So the meaning isn't hidden from them, it's hidden by their own lack of receptivity.
Exactly. The understanding depends on the disposition of the listener. You have to be willing to stop, come inside, and ask the question, just like the disciples did. Receptivity is the prerequisite for revelation.
This brings us to the final source in our stack, this devotional reflection called Cultivating the Soil of the Heart. It connects Psalm 65 to this gospel.
It does, yeah. Psalm 65.10 has this beautiful line, "You water its furrows abundantly, settling its ridges, softening it with showers."
Softening it, that's the link. If 2 Samuel is about the strength of a dynasty, the cedar house, the gospel is about the softness of the heart.
And that really creates a conflict between the two main readings. David wanted to do something big for God. Let me build you a cedar temple. Let me execute this huge construction project.
Right.
But the parable of the sower suggests that the real work isn't doing, it's being.
It's being the kind of soil that allows the seed to survive.
Right. You can't force the seed to grow. You can scream at porn all day. It won't grow faster. You can only create the conditions. You can water. You can weed.
It's the difference between architecture and agriculture. You can build a house on a deadline. You can't farm on a deadline.
And David's instinct, which is our instinct, is to build. We want the cedar house. We want the resume, the legacy, the tangible structure we could point to and say, I did that. I built that for God.
And God says, I don't need your house. I need your soil.
He needs us to do the weeding. The source material actually poses a very direct question to do something. It asks, what specific distraction or habit do I need to remove today?
That's the agricultural equivalent of pulling thorns, isn't it?
It is. And notice it's about subtraction, not addition. David wanted to add a temple to the Jerusalem skyline. Jesus implies we need to subtract the anxiety and the craving for other things.
If we look at that list of thorns again, anxiety, riches, other things, which one do you think is the dominant weed for the modern listener?
Oh, I'd argue worldly anxiety. I mean, we live in an information ecosystem that is literally designed to generate anxiety. If you are doom-scrolling news for 2 hours a day, you are effectively seeding your own heart with thorns.
That's a powerful image.
How can a message of peace and trust, which is the seed, survive in a soil that is hypersaturated with panic?
It gets choked out. It has no space.
And the lure of riches doesn't just mean money. It means the lure of more. Optimization. Efficiency. We want the 100-fold yield, but we want it on our terms, and we want it instantly.
But agriculture is slow. You can't speed up a seed.
No. And that brings us right back to the promise in 2 Samuel. God says to David, I will make your kingdom firm. God does the establishing.
It really shifts the burden, doesn't it? We started with David thinking everything depended on his initiative. I must build. We end with the realization that the growth comes from the seed, not the soil.
The soil just receives. God told David, I will build you a house. God initiates. In the parable, the sower sows. God initiates. Our job isn't to be the architect of our own salvation. It's to be the ground that doesn't resist it.
It's a lesson in humility, the humility of the tent versus the arrogance of the cedar palace.
It really is. And, maybe that's why Aquinas is relevant here, too. He was a genius and intellectual architect, but at the end of his life, he had a mystical experience and said all his writing was like straw. He realized that the structure he built wasn't the point. The encounter with God was.
We spend so much time trying to construct these impressive lives, the cedar houses of our careers, our reputations, our 5-year plans. But God seems much more interested in the messy, organic, underground work of root systems.
And remember, God was perfectly happy moving around in a tent. He never asked for the upgrade.
He was mobile, adaptable, accessible.
It was where the people were. He wasn't locked behind a cedar door.
So here is a thought to leave you with today. If God was content with a tent, are we perhaps too focused on building stable structures in our lives? Are we so obsessed with security, the cedar house, that we've lost the ability to be mobile and adaptable like the sower?
That is the question. Are we building walls to keep things out, or are we tending soil to let things in?
Something to mull over as you'd go about your Tuesday. Thanks for diving in with us.
See you next time.